Hi everyone, good day. Welcome to another class of organization and communication. All right, this is actually a pre-recorded lecture that I would like to share with all of you because I think that, with all the presentations that have been going on in our class recently, obviously it is not easy for us to be able to catch up with the syllabus, right? Which is why I'm doing actually a pre-recorded video on the lecture so that during the class we can really concentrate on everybody's presentation, and this will be used as a supplement so that you will be able to get some other knowledge and to really reconsider some of these things within your assignments as well. All right. Now, in all our previous week lectures and topics, we have been covering so many things from, ranging from classical management. We have been talking about leadership style. We have been talking about dealing with emotions at workplace. There's so many issues that we have actually really touched on. But I think there are a couple of things that we have not really go into the full detail. Today, I would like to just introduce all of you to another different concept that is often used within when we are discussing organizational communication. And this is the topic of system approach, all right? So I will be speaking to all of you really on covering more on how exactly do organizations work as a system, all right? And therefore we call it the system approach. Now, obviously, when you were to look at any companies or organization, you can look at a company or an organization as a system, right? Because technically there's so many people working inside a company, and it is often time when you see a company, they are like a very uh, complex system where there's different parts, consider it like your body parts, right? Body parts, you have your eye, your ear, your head, your hands, your legs, right? Your heart that is beating all the time. Now, we are a human being made up of a very complex system. Now, in the same case, many organizations, especially large organizations, right? They have different departments that comes together so that achieve the same goal, right? And at the same time, each of these department is constantly evolving and changing. For example, a communication department has to work together with the HR department. The communication department has to work together with the financial department. Financial department will have to work together with the management. So basically, everybody is dependent on everybody to do their job so that the company will run well, right? But at the end of the day, there's always a common goal that everybody in the organization is trying to achieve, right? Just as how your body will work well together to achieve whatever you want. For example, the act of walking or running. So an organization has to work together in order for it to come together to achieve a certain goal. I think that's very clear, right? As I mentioned, it's really, when you talk about system approach, you have to really look at it as your own body system. Why? Because system approach has this mindset where you can look at a company like a very complex human being, all right? And at the end of the day, the system approach says in an organization, input, you have input coming on from outside, inside, whatever you're into your company, and inside your company, whatever that is going on is what we call the throughput. And then obviously, whatever your company produces, for example, a product or a service that your company provided, that is an output. And of course, when your customer gives you feedback, now the cycle starts again, right? Because the feedback will be taken into consideration in the process of the input. So there will always be input, throughput, output, followed by feedback, right? That is how a system technically works within, if you were to look at it in a more, a very a simplistic way, all right? Now, at the end of the day, what does an organization tries to achieve? An organization is always trying to find the balance between the whole and the individual parts, right? Now, of course, as a boss of any company, you cannot say that the HR department is more important than the corporate communication department. or that, so therefore every resources that you have, you put to the corporate communication department, or every resources that you have, you put to the marketing department. You cannot do that, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to find a balance that you treat every department within a company in a balanced manner, so that at the end of the day, all of it will come together, right? And what you want is a system that works together as whole. And when everybody is working together well, and there is a synergy between everybody, the synergy among everything coming together is more important than the synergy of just some of the parts, which is why as a company, of course, you cannot please everybody, right? You will always make some people unhappy within your decision. And it's always about making sure that within the company, everybody or the overall interest is the one that is being put as a priority, rather than the interest of just a small group of people or just a little certain people, you know. That is how an organization can work well. Now, from this system approach, there is actually scholars who try to come up with models for this system. And for example, this one is what you call the system model by Krebs, okay? And so remember just now earlier, I was mentioning that there will always be an input, throughput, and an output. Now, from this particular concept that of input, throughput, and output, Krebs actually came up with this system model. So according to him, in a company, any company is always being affected by its environment, right? So for example, right now, of course, with COVID-19 affecting everybody and every company, that has to be taken into consideration into the operation of any company, right? It affects how you run your business. Now, of course, from the environment, any company often takes the energy. Okay, this is what is happening in the world, and you actually put it into your company. All right, so this is what's happening outside. I'm taking it in. Okay, so now that is what you call the input. All right, so with whatever resources that I have, what can I do right now? Okay, so with whatever resources that you have, you actually do it and transform it. This is where you are working together with all your co-workers and everything to transform whatever resources your company gives you into a good output. And of course, the output, remember, as I mentioned, you always get feedback. And the feedback will translate back into the whole process starting all over again. Now, this is system model in explaining how the company operates, okay? Now, basically in this particular approach, you are actually looking at a few things which we call the system basic. Now, what is system basic? Now, in system approach, it basically say, well, in any company, they are made up of little components and little items, right? So what you have to do is that in every company, you have to make sure that everything has hierarchical order. That means, you know, everything should have who is the highest, who is the lowest, who answers to who, right? So you must have a proper order of things, and you have to make sure that whoever is dependent on who, that there is a process of supporting between different components, right? And you must make sure it's actually permeability, all right? Now, what you may ask the question of, okay, what is the, you may actually ask the question of what is permeability, right? Now, permeability basically means the idea of, what's the word for it? Flexibility, okay? Now, any system has to be flexible, right? It's just like your body. Your body, when you try to, you know, put your hand towards the back, or if you were to try to stretch your body in a certain position, it needs a certain level of flexibility. Now, same thing as any company. A company needs to make sure that they are flexible enough in the things that they are doing, okay? Equilibrium is referring to a level of balance. In a company, You see, a balance is important between all the different departments to ensure that things are working well. And of course, adaptation, where you need to make sure that your whole organization is adaptable to changes that is happening in an organization. So according to the system basic, these are the 5 components that make up a good company, right? 5 components that make up a good company is when you actually have very good order, is when you actually make a system whereby everybody is depending on each other and supporting each other. You create a system in which everybody seems to be able to be flexible in the things that they do, achieving a certain equilibrium or what you call balance, and of course, adaptation, where you are able to actually adapt to whatever that is happening within your environment. So system basic have these 5 components of good organization, all right? And according to them, you also have to look at the way how you do your process in a company. You see, when you are exchanging information, when you between different departments, how does the process go? Did anything get lost within the process of exchanging, right? And also in terms of the feedback process, when somebody gives a feedback, when a customer gives a feedback to you, how do you deal with the feedback? Actually many companies, they always are being condemned when they actually do not care about customer feedback. When someone gives you feedback and then you just get ignored, right, and put aside, or that in the first place you don't even have a good place for them to lodge any complaint or to give you any form of feedback. So if you have a proper feedback process in place, it is only then when a good exchange process and feedback process is happening inside your system will your system be improving over time, right? So I think that makes sense. And this is, of course, at the end of the day, why do you need exchange and why do you need feedback? It's because you are trying to transform the way how you do things. Now, let's going back to this particular one, right? The way how you can see each of the error is moving within the system model is a process of exchanging, and also from the feedback, what exactly do you do? So this is a process in towards transformation, right? Now, so system basic basically tells you that your company must be made up of these good components and also having very good system processes in place. Okay, as well as that includes your process of exchanging information, your process of capturing and getting feedback, and also your process of transforming all of these things into something that is meaningful. Now, so according to the system approach, what exactly are some of the main premise that they believe in? They believe that the system is more important than any of the smaller parts of the system. So what do I mean by that? This is called the concept of holism. Holism means that, okay, everything has to be holistic, all right? Remember I mentioned earlier that at the end of the day, the idea is that as a company, you cannot say that you sacrifice a department for the importance of another department. You cannot say that, oh, okay, I'm going to just ignore this particular department. You can't really do that per se. But what you must make sure is that every part of the company is actually communicating with each other. Now, at the end of the day, the interest of the whole system, as I mentioned, overtakes the importance of the smaller leader part. All right. So hearing your employees are important, but it's just at the end of the day, what is the ultimate decisions and running of the system? Obviously, you have to look at the interests of everybody and not just one person. Okay. And that you must also look at the negative entropy. That means the ability of your company to actually sustain and grow. And of course, how complex is your company? The bigger the company is, of course, the more complex it becomes, right? The bigger a system grows, the more complex it becomes. So these are things, or what you call the properties, or you call the system features and characteristics that you have to be aware of. I think we spoke about organizational culture before. We talked about dealing with changes before. So you see, when you were to look at the company, right, you will realize that at the end of the day, they are made, whether a company survive or not, they are made up of these properties, or they are made up of this characteristic where they actually oversees the importance of everybody. They are able to identify ways to sustain and grow. And also in the process of them growing, they are able to deal with their complexity. Okay. And the more a company grows to become more complex, the more they need to make sure that they have equifinality, which is options and alternatives, right? So if let's say any company, your just communication platform alone, say for example, you are often communicating with your colleague via email. Imagine if the whole email system breaks down, does that mean you are unable to do your job? So there must always be more than one way for you to achieve your goal or your task. And of course, in the context of communication, we are talking about ways to achieve the communication within a company, right? So can we have more than one way to achieve a goal or a task of a company? That is very important again, especially when your company become more complex, having more people. Every system and process that is in place should have a backup plan or alternatives, right? And of course, you also have to look at the environment that you're operating in. You have to have what they call the requisite variety. An organization must be as complex as the environment it is in. So because why? If you're not complex enough, if you're not evolving enough to go along with your environment, then of course, when you are not as complex as your environment, you are unable to survive your environment, right? So system property, their position is that these are the 5 characteristics of an organization that can survive in long term. A company who has holism, negative entropy, who is able to deal with complexity, who is able to have many alternatives in achieving something, and of course, also to be as complex as the environment that it is in. You see? Now, as the system approach evolve over time, what they do have is that they actually adopt this mentality of like a computer system. Therefore, it's called the cybernetics system theory. So according to the cybernetic system theory, if you are in any company, right, there should always, remember just now we talked about process. Processes must be clear. Processes of communication must be clear. The processes of the way how you go about things must be clear. So cybernetic system theory is actually studying how you regulate communication and how you control communication within a company. And also if there's anything wrong with the system of the company, how do you correct them? Okay, so basically if you were to look at it, just imagine this, right? The internet, the ICT department of your company, when they are actually setting up the IT system of any organization, obviously they have to first look at the system goal, right? What exactly is this company trying to achieve? Do you need AI or artificial intelligence system within your company? If you're just a mere, I don't know, shipping company, or let's just say you are a small administrative company, or let's just say if you are a small accounting company, right? So what you have to see is that, all right, this company, for example, if you are an accounting company who does accounts for different clients, do you have the system to be able to support that? Do you have the mechanism to be able to support that? Of course, every company needs different system to be able to support it. So communication-wise, what exactly is your company's goal? Knowing your goal will be able to allow you to know what system is the best for that goal. And then you have the mechanism to be able to implement it. Say for example, I think that My companies need Zoom, my company needs Teams, my company basically needs Microsoft Outlook, and also HR system. I know these are the system that my companies needs to keep things running. And therefore, I must have a mechanism to put all of these things in place. Now, if anything goes wrong with any of the system, who do the people go to for feedback? And also, you have to understand that when you adopt a system, what is the behavior of that particular system? Because if you don't understand the behavior of the system, say for example, I want to make sure that everybody in my company uses Zoom, but you have no idea how many people Zoom can accommodate, you have no ideas about the features of the Zoom, then how can you actually adopt this in your company, right? And how can you make sure that this is operating smoothly? So these are cybernetic system theory is really focusing more on the computer, the ICT aspect of the communication, right? To say that you need to have important physical facilities to be able to support your communication based on whatever goal of communications that you have, all right? Now, from, again, system approach, there is this guy called Wick who came up with this theory of organizing. So according to Wick's theories of organizing, he says that, well, you see, at the end of the day in a company, right, you have many things which can be only accomplished via interaction. Obviously, right? You need to talk to your colleague to get things done. You need to talk to your boss to get things done. So he says that, well, you see, it's not just the system. Like, for example, you may have beautiful Microsoft Outlook. You may have great Gmail system going on. You may have good Zoom, platform. You may have great Microsoft Team facilities that are available. But if you don't have anyone using it, then what's the point, right? So at the end of the day, Wick takes the theory of system approach one step further. He said, well, yes, the system, the process, the structure is important, but the activities is also more important. That you must make sure that everything that you are doing in a company, when you are organizing it, all of it has the element of communication within it. Okay, and to make sure that whenever you have to create the sense of activities that people are actively using the structure that you have put in place, right? Because and every activities you try to put in place, you must make sure that it's designed to reduce uncertainty, to reduce people's doubt, and to make sure that whatever you do, you are bringing meaning towards your member when you are interacting with them. That's the take of Wick's theory of organizing, okay? Where he says, you have the system, then you have to make sure that within the system, you are applying activities that is meaningful for your members in the system. Otherwise, the system is not going to work, okay? Now, according to him, so how do you make sure that the activities of your organization is actually in line with what you're trying to communicate? So he uses these 4 things, right? He said, first of all, you have to set up the environment of communication. You have to make sure that you create an environment where you are able to make people talk, give rooms to people to talk, interact, communicate. Secondly, he says you must actually have enactment where you actually make the members of your organization feels more positive about the way how they are making sense of the environment. I mean, you know how certain people actually feels more, what's the word for it? They feel like, okay, they dread going to work, right? You feel stressed, you feel like you do not want to go to work, you feel, whenever you think about your workplace alone, you get very tense up, right? Now, that means you are making sense of the environment in a very negative manner. So the thing is, weak component says you in the process of enactment, you should make sure that the enactment of the environment is done in a positive manner in any company. All right, you have to make sure that people feels like coming to work. You have to make sure that you make it in such a way that people feel like talking to you. You make people feel welcome. You make people feel that they are part of the group. All right, so you got to set up a positive environment. You got to set up a positive enactment or feeling towards the environment. You have to make sure that you reduce all forms of equivocality. Like, remember I mentioned equivocality basically means uncertainty, doubts, not sure what to do. You must always have good guidelines and rules in order for you to reduce this particular part of unsurety. People don't know what to do. And besides the guideline, you have to make sure that you have a proper communication cycles that is going on. So that, if, okay, I'm doing something, I don't understand, who do I approach? Okay, after I approach the person, I do according to what the person say. Who do I go for feedback again? And the round will keep repeating itself. The communication will keep going on until you are able to improve in the way how you work, right? So equivocality is about uncertainty, and you will want to reduce that inside your company through good communication and through good communication cycles. Also, at the same time, you are trying to do retention. Retention, which means, okay, now in this situation, I have something that's uncertain. There was a miscommunication going on. There was an argument that went on. People don't know what they are doing. And so there was an issue. And then, of course, remember I mentioned using your skill, you actually reduce it by going through the guidelines and then by communicating again and again to the people who are not understanding. That's reducing equivocality, but there must always come to a time where you say, okay, so this has been happening a couple of times. So how can I make sure this doesn't happen in future? That is retention. I mean, a company only gets better when you are improving in the way how you communicate by time, right? Because you are retaining whatever information. Okay, so there was an equivocality, but all right, there was a certain uncertainty that has been, I've tackled it, and I will save this information to make sure that in future, the same thing doesn't happen again, right? That is, so we have actually covered the cybernetics theory. We have also covered the Weeks components and Weeks theory of organizing. Now, the next one I would like to move on to is again, as time goes by, the theory evolve. It has this called the new science system theory. Now, new science system theory says this, okay? It actually stems from the chaos theory. So what it's saying is that, you see, the environment is so uncertain. Everything is so chaotic. There is no order to the way how things are, okay? And order will only emerge from disorder. So what this new science system theory is saying is this. Chaos will always happen. There is no linear or logical process at times, right? So, I mean, just as how when, again, COVID-19 is a perfect example of disorder, right? When it happens, everybody was like, what happened? Quarantine? What? And then from the disorder is when the order will emerge. So what it is saying is that in any company, you must be able to embrace the chaos. Because when you are embracing the chaos, it's only then that the order will come. Things will become more orderly, all right? And the system don't strive for equilibrium. New science system says, okay, forget about getting balance, okay? We don't go for that anymore. So that's why it's called the new science system theory. Because they realize that the old system theories all doesn't seem to be, it's all always about striving for balance. It's all about keeping the communication well, keeping things in place. But new science system theory, what it is saying is just this, that, okay, look, when we are having a chaos or when things are becoming very complex, it is only then that new innovation will come up. New forms will come up and new processes will only emerge when there is a certain level of chaos. So what it is saying is that embrace the chaos. From the chaos, a new order will come, which is again bringing COVID-19 into perspective. This is actually a very good theory. Imagine it, right? There were so many companies when COVID-19 first started, they don't know how to communicate to their employee. Whether you are working from home, okay, fine, you are now working from home, stay at home. And then, okay, but how am I going to tell my employee how to work from home? Then your employer will call you and say, hey, so how am I supposed to be doing this? The system is physical. And then you are like, oh, okay, wait, everything is physical, then how? Then people need to go back to their office to collect certain things. There's so much chaos going on last year. But you see, from the chaos is when things become more, an order came out from disorder, right? People start to be more innovative in the way they work. Okay, so I'm working from home. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to digitalize all my document. I'm going to make sure. So people find new ways to work from home. And people has been finding new ways and new process to be able to adapt to whatever the current situation is. So from chaos, and a new order has emerged. So much so that right now the discussion is even, if working from home is working out now, should anybody even go back to office after the whole pandemic is over? And how will this affect the way we communicate to our colleagues in future? And how will this affect the way we work, the way we communicate to our management, our boss, our customers, our stakeholders? These are things which are changing again by time, you know. And new science system theory seems to be the most suited in the case of COVID-19, if you were to look at it. Now, from the system model, from the system approach, another model that came about was what you call the congruence model. Now, so when, remember just now earlier, I was telling you, the system approach, you start by looking at it as if like, the system is referring to human body, right? Now, as time goes by, I mentioned earlier, within the cybernetic system theory, you are trying to look at the system as a computer system. Now, if you were to look at a congruence model says this, okay? Look at a company as a puzzle. And the question is, of course, are you part of the puzzle? Are you a fitting puzzle? That's why the congruence model always use the word fit. That means, if you were to look at my slides, are you aligned to the company's strategy? Are you aligned with your work? Are you aligned with the way how communication is ongoing within the company? Are you aligned with the people inside the company? Do you align with the structure of the company, and do you align even with the culture of the company? You see, that's why at the end of the day, you may be a wonderful worker, but there are certain places which just doesn't suit you because you are not a fit to the company. You are not a piece of their puzzle, right? Because at the end of the day, the higher degree of fit, the more you are a puzzle that's able to be fit into the system, the more effective the companies become. Which is why when you get into a company, it is so important for you to know whether are you aligned with the way how things are, right? And that is what the higher degree of fit, the more you are fitting into the culture, the way how things are, the more congruent you are with the company, then the more you are able to perform in your job as well, right? And at the end of the day, the congruence model also tells you that why is it finding the perfect fit is so important? I won't say perfect fit, but the higher degree of fit, right? Because as the system theory has mentioned, the interdependence between different departments, interdependence between you and your colleagues are very, very critical. Now, if you want any company to be able to be transformed, okay, to make sure that your work process and your business process is everything has been done in such an effective way, you need to make sure that you have the proper fit. fit of the way works are being done, fit of the communication strategy, fit of the right people, fit of the right culture, the right structure, the right strategy, basically, right? And the greater the total degree of congruence between the different components are, the more effective the organization will be. So in another way, if you want to have a very effective company, you need to have puzzles that fits together. You cannot have great people but don't have great communication system. You have great communication system but you don't have great strategy. You have great strategy but your culture is super negative, also no point. So everything must be fitting together in terms of all of these elements, right? And of course, when you talk about fitting, you may ask the question, what do you mean by fit? Who fits who? Again, according to this particular theory, definition of fit in the congruence model is this. Are you, as an individual, are you able to fit to the culture of your company? Are you able to fit to your work? Are you able to do your work? Are you able to fit to the informal organization? That means, are you able to talk to your colleagues, you know, on a casual basis, nothing about work, informal? Are you able to talk to your boss? And at the end of the day also, is your work matching or fitting with what the organization wants? Is your work also matching with whatever that is happening informally? And is your company as a whole fitting well with whatever that is happening informally? So you may say, company fitting in with whatever that is happening informally. What does that mean? The way how you do things formally with whatever that's happening in reality, does it align? Say, for example, okay, the formal rule says that you must do step A, B, C, D, E. But informally or in reality, people do A and then the next thing people do E. People don't do B, C, D. Because, you know, as you're talking, you say, hey, stupid, why ask us to do B, C, D? You know, we'll do A and E, then enough, you know, we get things done. No need to do B, C, D. That means the real rules or the formal rules or the formal organization is not fitting with whatever that's happening informally. So when all these things must align, the individual, the work, the informal organization, and the organization must align. It's only when these four different things align that, again, the company will be more effective, right? So yeah, according to, it is from the congruence model that they actually created this, okay? Where you are trying to see a link between everybody, okay? From the input or your environment or whatever resources that you have and the history of your company. It will build your strategy, right? So from your strategy, how is it affecting these four things? Remember earlier we mentioned the individual, the work, the informal organization, and the formal organization. You must have the perfect fit here, because the perfect fit here will be the one that will be able to implement your strategy to produce wonderful output, system, unit, and also individual. That's what you want. You want your company to have great output. You want your company to have great system. You want your company to have great unit. And you want your company to have great individuals working for you. But these can only be achieved through the congruence fit of each of these together. The alignment of each of these things together, right? So that is what we call the congruence model. So we have covered the system approach as a whole. Now, lastly, there is this thing of what you call the critical approach. Now, the critical approach actually comes from more of the political perspective, right? Now, how is it being applied in an organization? Many theories from the critical approach. Again, critical approach is completely different from system approach. So system approach is system approach. We are now moving towards the critical approach. Again, I'm covering this also as this is another topic that we will have to cover when it comes to the different approaches that is available out there. Now, critical approach says that we must be critical, right? You must be critical in the way how you run your business. and how you communicate within a company. And in a company, are you actually looking at people with different interests and different conflict in a positive manner, and how are you handling it? Okay. And the critical theory always says that in any organization, in any company, there's always a people who are dominating and people who are oppressed. So the question is always to free the people who are being dominated, free the people who are being oppressed from the dominator. Okay. Now, let's think about the roots of critical approach. Now, critical approach, it says that, okay, see, in any company, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels say, in any company, when you give people power, there will always be an imbalance of power, and that leaders always tend to abuse their power, okay? And the critic, it always says that, okay, if you will try to criticize the way how your leader do things, it will always lead to revolution, okay? Critique will always lead to revolution. And the problem is this, okay? People should not be afraid to retaliate. So if you feel that the leaders are being abusive, the leaders are not using their power in the right way, that will always lead to revolution. People who are really not afraid to fight back, okay? So what it is saying is, under the critical theory, is this: the overall structure of society is what leads to imbalance of power. And when there's an imbalance of power, when there's one person who's too powerful and one person who's too powerless, you will lead to people being alienated or being oppressed, right? Just as how, even in any company, okay, there will always be, workplace bullying, people who are being bullied, people who are being pushed around because they don't have the power. And the critical approach, they actually don't care about system, just like system approach, they don't care about all of that. They always say that the critical approach is, if there is any imbalance in any company, they try to bring to attention who are the oppressed people. For example, if you are talking about context of working, even people who are of darker skin, for example, the Black people, they often have problem finding work. Women seems to struggle to find work, especially a woman who just got married or who is currently pregnant. They will always seems to be harder to find work. And even in an organization, women seems to be seen as more difficult to climb the ladder of leadership. Well, again, this is not my opinion, but rather this is more of some of the main issues that is being covered under the critical approach, okay? Now, so what is power? The way you define power within an organization is very important and centered to the topic of this, okay? Now, so what the critical approach is saying is this, okay? Traditionally, we always look at things in a, who hierarchy structure, who is the boss, who is below, right? So the one who is upper part on the structure obviously is more powerful than the one who is below. Now, symbological approach is always saying that, okay, well, power is defined as when you are communicating, one person is more powerful than the other. There's a symbolic sense of power when two persons are communicating. Radical critical approach, they are saying that, okay, look, there is a huge problem in a lot of companies, big companies especially, okay? There's a structure that is in place that will, in the end, produce very hostile work environment. For example, racism issues, again, gender bias. Imagine LGBT at workplace, they may get abused way more than a normal one. Sometimes even your political view is being questioned. Yeah, so again, there are many radical issues that's happening at workplace that is often excluding a certain group, okay, from it, right? Now, at the end of the day, according to the critical approach, why at the end of the day there's such imbalance of power? Number one, because there is a control of the modes of production. That the whole economic system seems to be catering to certain people and not catering to certain people. That's why people always say the word, right? The richer get richer, the poor gets poorer. The rich get richer, the poor gets poorer, right? So this, why? Because the rich people has more advantage in terms of the modes of production. So again, in a society, if there are some people who are so rich and yet others are dying of hunger, that is a social issue. That is a critical issues that we should be addressing, right? And even in the means of production, the way our work process is being done is also another means of way by which power can be abused, right? Like for example, the use of child labor, in producing your product, because child labor is cheap. Again, these are some of the things that critical approach is fighting against and saying that, you shouldn't be using kids for your work because kids should not be working. The control of gender issue, as I mentioned earlier, women being stereotyped, being emotional, having empathy, intuition seems to be scorned off in any company. And of course, even the way how we actually talks in a company matters a lot. That's why the way we communicate can empower power, all right? Which is why there's so much discussion, so much debates going on gender equality, making sure that children are not being abused in the work environment, making sure that it's not just the rich who are getting richer, but that opportunities are given for people to climb up the level, right? Now, at the end of the day, another two key things that is happening within the critical approach is this. Everybody have a certain ideology. Ideology is basically your assumption of what reality is. So imagine if a person has this assumption that because I'm white, I am supreme, I'm better, I'm great, that is very bad because it influences the way how you perceive situations and events. So everybody can have ideology, whether it's good or it's bad, it's another question, right? And sometimes if a group of people who are having the wrong ideology, they come together and they become the dominant group, that is going to be a problem, isn't it? And the dominant group will create the sense of hegemony, which means the similarity of culture across the board. And then the people who are not within their dominant group, they are the being suppressed, the oppressed, or the minority that has to accept it. So the idea is, of course, in every company, you are trying to break hegemony. You want diversity, you want people to be diverse, you want different, more women, you want equal men, women in the company, you want to make sure that different races are being taken into consideration, you want to make sure people with different ideologies are being in the company so that there are more opinions being celebrated. There's not one that conquers it all, right? And of course, the critical approach often takes the idea of emancipation, where you say, we should all be doing something to free people from restrictive tradition, assumption, ideology, or power relations. Okay? But yet, at the same time, the question is, of course, not everybody wants to be liberated. Remember earlier I brought up about the child labor? The issue is that not everybody wants to be liberated from it. Certain children say, why you want me to be free? I want to work. I like to work. I get money from working. So you go and tell the child that, hey, you're being manipulated. You shouldn't be working. You should be studying. And the child say, I don't want to study. I want to work. So not everybody wants to be liberated. But whatever the case is, okay, this can be different in different companies. But even in the most hegemonic culture where everybody seems to be coming back from same culture, just remember the employees will always have some ability to resist how the control of the management, all right? And power and the person who is dependent on the power, that will always not be fixed, right? The power can never be balanced. There will always be someone who is the boss, someone who is subordinate. But the problem is that there must be a balance where the subordinate has a certain level of control over what, being aware of how they're being controlled, being aware of what is my right, how can I control the situation as much as I can, so that they are not being oppressed, right? So there are actually a couple of critical approach theory, for example, the concerted control theory, okay, where basically concerted control theory says that in every group, even whatever team-based environment, you know, as long as there's a team working together, right, there will always be a power relations. And the thing is, the power is invaded by rules, discipline, certain way of identifying with your group. You feel pressured to do a certain things because you're part of the team. So people who are working with the team, they're often like, okay, this group is like that, so I must behave in a certain way so that I fit into the group. In other words, you are basically identifying with the value of the group and changing yourself to go according to the group. So to a certain extent, the group has control over you. That's concerted control theory. As I mentioned earlier, they control you to make sure that you identify with the group, and then you discipline yourself to follow the rules and the regulations. Okay, that's critical approach. Of course, feminist theories is again another one that is often used in critical approach, where we are talking about how, you know, in any company is always tend to be very patriarchal or siding towards more of men, right? There's actually different views towards how man is dominating the world, based on liberal feminists, radical feminists. There's different types of feminists as well. But of course, right now, the main thing is that most of the feminist theories, they are actually dealing with sexual harassment at workplace, making sure that company policies don't discriminate against people who are actually being sexually harassed, to make sure that people who are sexually harassed are being protected well and are not suffering from any hostile work environment, should they choose to report themselves, right? Well, so it's actually almost an hour-long lecture, but at the end of the day, going through the system approach, you know, the critical approach, I've run through so many different theories with all of you. Maybe it's good for us to actually ask the questions. Okay, so at the end of the day, what does all of this means to us, right? Are we taking things too seriously? And maybe you can even ponder back at, have you ever felt like you're marginalized, or you are put at a disadvantage, or you miss an opportunity because of your cultural characteristic? So at the end of the day, what is the role of the communication and how can we make a change? You know, we will discuss this in our class soon after some of the presentations are over. I think these are good questions that we can discuss when it comes to the topics of different approaches in an organizations. Okay, all right, so with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing screen. I want to say thank you so much for surviving through the 1 hour lecture. I hope it has been a fruitful one for all of you, okay? So take care, and I will see all of you again. Bye.